Who is
Well,
from India? I mean,
let
recording.
me see what her name is. She even signed up for the whole thing. Antara. Antara Biswas. Yeah, she does really cool work with the paintings and all this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the pattern we're gonna do today, pretty much. And it's a very beautiful pattern. It's found in the Alhambra. Well, it's in those miniature sort of little shrines they have there. I don't know what their name is. They actually do have a very specific name. I have to ask Richard. But it's very beautiful. Well, I colored it the outline in red, but yeah. The original doesn't have any outline. It's just the coloring of the schemes here. And so what we're going to take into account is how this is a combination of a rhombic 45 rhomb and a square. The square can be found if we combine these four. Right here, these 4 points, the center of this eighth, that makes a square. And the other shape is the rhomb. So the rhomb comes around like from this one to this one, like here. You can see half of it. And where the rhomb is where we find these shapes. So if we have these shapes, I mean, there's a rhomb here. So it goes in the shortest path it can take up to the top one, and then it should go out. Doesn't see there. And what's cool about this one is it's a matter of sort of generation, as we call it. And what that means is that we can choose the scale of the pattern depending on how much we want it to be in. And this one I just chose, this is I think one of the bigger scales on it. The original pattern has a very wide scale. It's very plenty. It's plentiful. So we're gonna work with a square first. So first things first is to get a square. Let me just get into position here. All right. So yeah, first we start with the square. And so what's nice about this one also is that all we need to take into account are the eightfold radial divisions. Everything is pretty cut and dry. So it's been a very busy week, I'd say. But I'm getting back into the habit of watching movies again. I used to watch a movie a day when I was in high school. First days of college, and I sort of got out of the habit. I don't know, it's nice to watch movies. I like movies. So we're not going to establish any particular center as of now. All we really care about is sort of the generation on it for now. So we have to establish just a certain guidelines, certain rules on this. And that means like how far do we want to take this? It can be a fourth, it can be a fifth, or not. It can be, here, let me show you the pattern that we're going to do. I mean, the pattern as in the underlying grid. So this is the underlying grid pretty much. So this rhomb is an eightfold rhomb and this is a square. And so it just goes around in this sort of sequence where the crosses are is in the center of these rhombs, and where the shapes are, the sort of shield shapes, these ones are found in the square. These points represent where it's at. The star, as we can see, if we sort of connect the points, they can be found in the midpoint of the edge of the square. So as first things first is to build the grid. So we need to build this grid. And so we can make it as big as we want to make it. So first off, we're going to just get our eightfold divisions in. And sort of begin to picture where this is going to go. in that, you know, we could establish this and then we just have to bounce it out wherever we want it to be at. Now this one I did here was a half, but I feel that that's a little bit too too big. So we should do something a little bit smaller. So I'll tell you what though, we're gonna have finished establishing the eightfold divisions here. At least in one corner we are. This is just it's a guiding mechanism. In that whatever fold we do next, this one's gonna have to be perpendicular. Yeah, so this last line that we have here is gonna fall perpendicularly. So now it's a matter of just choosing a point on this line where we wanna sort of fall on. So, all right, let's see if we can find any relationships to the other division. Let's say we had it like that. So we have it like that, and then we do another cross here. Okay, so how about at that point, we drop a perpendicular. So we've seen how to draw perpendiculars before, right? It's just a matter of when the advantage here is that we can use the edges as a guiding principle, and also we find that that line touches that, and of course the edges fall on themselves. So now we established that at that point, perpendicular, now we can use this intersection here as a landing site for this one. Although apparently, as we can see, this is sort of, well, this perpendicular was sort of unnecessary in that if we fold this intersection here, also when we fold that, that's going to hit exactly where this line comes in. So it's a nice relationship that we have. So now this is going to be, I'm guessing, a little bigger than the one example I showed you now. That's fine. So we begin by, so in order to not get lost, I'm going to use a black pencil here, a colored pencil, to be drawing in the grid. So every time I have a rhomb, I then need to establish a square. And actually you can see almost that this square is going to go, you can see the cross that's happening here. So now that means that we have to draw a line that connects these 2 points. And then one that goes parallel to that one. So let's see, this falls there. Now, it'd be easier if we could see the intersection on this. So we might as well turn it over. I'm turning it this way so I can fall that way. And the reason being that I can actually see my cross on this side. Here's my cross. And now I pivot and I push and pull the paper in order to find where the intersections are. So I establish that, and actually that line will fall on the edge there. I can follow that.
You're making a full crease?
We don't have to actually, that's a good question. But I did make it because I found yesterday that actually these lines could come handy. But they actually will, like, yeah, you'll see what I mean, but, and you're right, it's not necessary.
But I made it. I made it the full crease.
I make the full creases too because you never know if it will come in handy for later. So, as long as just to be sure, And so I've drawn in the bottom part of this square, and we already have the side, but I shouldn't draw it. Well, actually I can draw it because I do have the point of this thing sort of bouncing out, going back. And actually, when we begin to fold now this line, we see how this corner is going to land exactly on that one over there, on that edge.
Yeah.
So another
Again,
nice
you have to
relief.
make a full line.
Excuse me?
Line is not.
Yeah, I'm just making full lines, but again, like all these are up to you.
Mine is not falling on that line, on that point.
It isn't?
Yeah. It's like this. This is the line.
I think it should, because you can see we have.
See, mine is on wrong direction. Some problem is there.
Opposite direction?
Yes, yes. On the other side of the paper.
Well, it should, because, you know, we can see here, actually, yeah, you may be right that this doesn't land exactly on the point.
Oh, did I miss any line? You're so fast, no?
Oh, sorry.
Because I have to look at the screen and then on my paper.
Right.
See
I'm actually
what
looking
is.
at the screen more than I do in my hands. Okay. Okay.
I'm missing some line.
Yeah, hold on. You begin by the rhomb and then the square. And so we're pretty much just building the grid. So what's important is that the grid gets done. So the pattern or the construction can either be proactive or reactive, right?
Okay,
there are some things that are just
one,
mathematically.
sorry.
Excuse me?
Sorry. My one crease was missing.
Oh, I see.
I did not make this full crease. It was
Well,
here
I think
only.
it will come in handy in a little bit, because you're gonna see how. Well, for instance, the next line that we have to draw completes this rhomb, which we have here partially. So now we need the line that goes from there to here. So the general advantage is just that lines are going to fall on themselves. For instance, this line is going to serve as a perpendicular sort of reference point, where this line falls on itself. You can see that then this line hits there as well. And you can keep an eye out for an intersection. So you can see two lines that are coming in. And if you miss, if for whatever reason you miss, you can always sort of correct. You can always like, oh, I need to push it a little bit higher, and then you push it up a little bit higher and you fold it. I guess a lot of the sort of attractiveness of constructing these patterns through compass and straight edge is sort of like the neatness of it. But, you know, even those compass and straight edge construction, they have a nitty-gritty side to them, right? They can get pretty dirty sometimes. At least the behind the scenes is pretty dirty. Origami is just the same, although I think it's a little bit dirtier, but it's also very personal in that you get to sort of appreciate all the idiosyncrasies and the way that it sort of came about. So now, as you can see, what's next is just we need a line that goes like this one goes down the other way. Now, this line's the one's going to fall on itself, but I suspect that it's shorter from here than it is to there. It might be the same, actually. Yeah, it turns out it's the same. And what I mean by that is that this line is falling on that point, that one. And this one is also falling on itself. So, you know, there might be some things that sort of get a little bit out of line sometimes. Well, it happens to me quite often that things are just like a little bit out. But, you know, we persist. Now, the idea of what we're doing now is sort of reacting to what we're doing, to the pattern itself. We're trying to construct it. right? We're trying to bring it into existence. And so we can establish certain rules, we can establish certain relationships, but I think that what we want to do now is more than that, is just to sort of construct it as though we were sort of putting blocks next to each other and building it, and appreciating all the nuances in the way that this relates to itself, rather than finding some specific instruction, rather more like, all right, what do I need now? So we can appreciate that, all right, we have half of this rhomb here, so we need the other half of the rhomb. This line we already had from this cross. So sometimes it is useful to have like the full crease, because it will extend. In all cases, from the, at least across the square, they always extend to the another line. And then this one will be here, and then this one will come down. I'm just gonna give a little minute for the catch up. Let's see what else we can find here. So also notice how at the edges of the rhomb, there's always gonna be a square. You can also see it in this half rhomb we have on the bottom. Always squares on the edges. So now on these edges, there's also got to be squares. There's also going to be a square here. You can even begin to sort of do the cross for this one. You can even sort of imagine it, the way it's going to come down through this line. And when you imagine a line also, you can start to think about it. It's sort of, what is it parallel to? What is it perpendicular to? Which line is it going to fall on? So for instance, if we wanted to sort of do the cross inside of this square, we know a vertex of the square, and we also apparently see that there's a cross on it. So we would appreciate, or at least we could sort of understand how we would like a line to go from that point and for this line to fall on itself. So when I lift it, I check my reference. I mean, I check the intersection, and when I do, I check the intersection, make sure the line falls on itself. And you can see, well, it's a very comfortable landing site. You can see that it's actually the complete eightfold division of that corner, right? So that's a very beautiful thing in the way it just comes about and sort of relating to itself. And so now we want the line that goes cutting down there. So what is it perpendicular to? So when we fold this line from the bottom of the square, this line is going to fall on this whole line, right? Because these two are perpendicular, right? So we have a vertex of where we know.
These two are perpendicular.
Well, yeah, the edges of the square are perpendicular. So I'm like doing my left hand here, sort of the imaginary bottom line of this square.
Okay.
And then with my right hand, I'm putting it over this edge, which we already have. You can see the cross of the square already sort of informing me on where this is going to be at. Also, the line we're missing is going to be right there, which is also going to be parallel to this one. So this one's going to be where this one's going to be. So we have two vertices, and we have a guiding line, a perpendicular line for them. So we need to do a fold that's perpendicular to this line that goes through here and through here. That's. All right, so we do the bottom one first. So what I can do also is, you can notice how my thumb is on the back of the paper here. And what I do is I sort of find the pressure on it. You can see that while I'm focusing on how there, I can sort of see, appreciate, and then I start bringing it down. And I focus on the fact that this line is going to fall on itself. I sort of trace it back, push it back a little bit, keeping an eye out on the intersection, right? This line's going to come in, so is this one, and so is this one. All those lines are going to come in. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that the intersection is respected, that this line is falling on itself, and everything else I can sort of just, do as a sort of secondary action. Now, if I do it correctly, right, I'm going to make sure that these two lines are going to fall on themselves. I'm going to see that because these two should be parallel, and therefore these two should be falling on themselves. When one falls on itself, the other one should fall on itself. It does happen, eventually it will happen, especially when we, as we do more complicated folds, that these lines can sort of, again, sort of deviate. And these deviations, I think that sometimes they should be appreciated for what they are, and that's the curvature of space itself sometimes. And also, you can see how this edge starts falling on there. So again, we're doing something very symmetrical. Next one is going to be here. Now, why am I going to turn my paper, rotate my paper? Well, because I can see, or I can maybe imagine, that on this line, which I'm going to draw here, this line seems to be longer than this one. And therefore, if I bring it down over here, I can't see if it does fall on itself or not. I can see the intersection, I can mind that, but I don't see whether it's falling on itself or not. This sort of covers it. So I try to fold on the way that it shows the most uncovering. Again, see that that falls there, which is another nice relationship. This point also on an intersection. These two lines falling on themselves. Apparently this one should fall as well. I'm beginning to see a little bit of deviation, a little bit of an error on mine. But again, I don't mind, it's fine. Because I'm focusing in on small victories. I'm focusing in on making my shapes. More than I want my whole construction lines to work, which, you know, it is useful. What I'm focusing in on now, the main goal right now, is just to get my shape going. Now, what am I doing? I have another vertex here, and I have two lines that are falling on themselves. One of them, of course, is not accessible to me because when I bring it down, there's no paper on this line, right? But there is paper on this line. So we look at the lines that we do have, and we try to construct that square. So for instance, mine right there, I can see that it's a little bit out. So I can push it up and then squeeze it, push it up and squeeze it until I hit the point that I want, or like seems to fit in the most. More than this line not falling on the edge. Even though at this point it's a little bit up, I prefer that to be a little bit up and actually hit the vertex than I would prefer for that to match to that line. Because what I care about is the shape. And the shape involves sort of a bounce at the vertex. I don't mind that this is falling out of the line. That's secondary. So now we begin to see how there's going to be a line that goes through there. We have an intersection. So we begin to wonder, well, like, what is this line that we want to draw in perpendicular to? Same questions. Well, we see that, you know, right here. Let me get another pencil just to do the perpendicular sort of idea. So we have that line that I know is going to be there, right? This line is going to go upwards there. And this line is going to be perpendicular right here. So we have a point where we want a line to fall on, and we have the perpendicular line to guide us. So as you can see, for this exercise, we're not doing mirrors. This is more of an exercise on finding points and corresponding a perpendicular to it. You can see again, like maybe this will land on itself, well, on the edge, but more than that, what I care about is that these lines fall on themselves, because that's the basis of the construction, having perpendicular lines. And for perpendicularity, we need this overlap at that point. So if I find that I'm missing a little bit, if I'm not on the actual vertex, you know, I can always lift it up a little bit or whatever. So again, we're focused more on the construction. So okay, so that's one. Now the other one's going to come through there. You can see that this is the line that it's perpendicular to, right? This one, and this one over here as well. So all these three lines could be also four. So the more pattern we construct, the more of these lines are going to be available to us. And the more, if we have a mistake, the more that's going to sort of also pop out at us. So it kind of cuts both ways. Now, as much as we appreciate precision, there comes a point where we actually do need to let the idea of perfection go, or the idea of things just being exactly right go, even though that they're theoretically possible.
Can
We
you
need
show
to
the
sort of,
orientation of the paper? Just second.
oh yeah,
Okay,
sure, sure.
like this. Now, okay. Hold it like this. Like so.
Actually, it's kind of confusing maybe because I'm rotating it around so much.
Yes.
So that's also why you should consider drawing in on your paper, because then that could help you. And maybe also try to focus more on your own
Okay.
pattern and like trying to find the sequence on it, you know?
Okay.
So we begin to appreciate how the grid is becoming, it's beginning to form. Now, the way I'm doing it is sort of thinking about this as though I'm stacking bricks. So it's almost as I'm building upwards. Or well, first was to the side, and now once I'm completed to here, now I'm gonna go up. So first I should complete this just as much as this side is to this side. We could use some mirror tricks, right? We could fold it in half and then just copy these folds on this side. It's an option. Or we could stick to our guns and keep folding these based on the perpendicular lines. So the advantage of having these ones, and by these ones I mean the radial lines at the corners, is that those are pretty easy to construct. And by easy, I mean that they have very clear and definite relationships, which we can take advantage of. And it's also relatively simple to be sure that that's that. And so to use them as cornerstones, it's also pretty wise. So I'm just gonna finish compensating sort of like I did this one here, I'm gonna do this one over here. Now, if my instinct doesn't fail me, I believe that this sequence will not end the same on the other side of the square. And by that, I mean that as we move the pattern upwards, we're gonna see that this corner over here will not be like this one. That's my suspicion. I might be wrong. We'll see what happens. Apparently this is the middle point. We'll see what happens though. I'm not so sure because we have a square here and then it's from this point that the next rhombus is sort of coming out. So I don't know. We'll see. But we do have a cross though. We do have a cross, two crosses. The cross is here and another cross is over here. Okay. So now that I actually drew in this, also this radial line, I can see that that actually is part of a rhomb. Right?
Okay.
Identify my line. Line's gonna go through there, right? Line's gonna go through here. These points are gonna connect. So find my perpendiculars. Right here, here, mostly those two. 1, 2. On that point. Now, although we're constructing something pretty symmetrical and it has a definite sort of scale to it, the point of this exercise is also to show how paper folding could be used as a drafting tool for grid construction based on perpendicular lines sort of intersecting and shooting outwards. Now we do that.
I didn't get this one. Yeah, I'm very slow.
Yes. Excuse me, Sashi?
Yeah, I've got it.
Got it. Good. Now I can see my square coming in and have the point of the square. So this line is going to be perpendicular to this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. All of those are going to be. So this seems to be the shorter side. That is to say, when I fold it, seems to be. That's my intersection. You know, it might be actually worth something to draw the points of the pattern on the other side of the paper, so that when we lift it up to draw, we can actually see the intersections out at us. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna turn my paper over. I'm just gonna put a point on the vertices of the pattern as we do have it. So I can see the crosses of the squares which are guiding me, the squares and the rhomb. That's the rhomb. That's the square. Rhomb. How you doing, Sashi?
I'm doing fine, I guess.
You getting the grid?
Mm.
Now this pattern we're going to do, actually, this scale is bigger than the one I had the other example. But it's going to look better. It's going to take maybe a little bit more time. Are you okay with doing compass and straightest construction, Sashi, to save time, or how are you feeling on that? Or would you rather
What
fold?
compass and all? I don't have.
I'm not good at the compass and straight edge, but I do feel that in some cases it actually would be more of a time saver. But I have, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. We have already done this much. I think I can do it on my own pace later. So you can finish it with compass. Yeah.
No, I think we're
Because
going
I have
fine.
understood the pattern. It's just that I need my time to finish it. I will do
That's
it.
good. That's good. That's honestly, that's the better way to do it, Sashi. Don't feel pressured by my account, because I think that the best pace is one's pace. Like, yeah, as long as you feel comfortable doing it and having fun, that's the best way to do it. So yeah, the general idea is to be folding the pattern and then again keeping an eye out for the intersections. There I missed my intersection actually, because I was more focused. See, that's the thing. I was more focused on this line falling on the edge than I was looking at the intersection. Yeah, that's maybe actually useful to do these points, because then you make sure that you go through them. A little higher. It's always worth to course correct. If you find that you made a little mistake, it's fine if you sort of fold, go back and fold, because the pattern and the fold, the paper will prefer to be going through an intersection than not. It's very interesting, but it's true. Hard to believe. I can see my cross happening. All these perpendicular lines. Again, not going through the point. So I do insist, the most important thing is to go through the points. Landing sites are not necessarily the best guidance. What is useful guidance are the lines falling on themselves, the perpendiculars. So sometimes the harder part is just sort of orienting your paper in order to find a line that's perpendicular you can use as a, like, to fall on itself kind of deal. That's usually what takes longer. And also like finding which side you want to fall on so you can actually see the lines and that kind of stuff. So there are general simple rules which we can just sort of compound and compound and compound. So of course, this is just the first step. This is just the grid making. And it might be very useful for, you know, for all sorts of general purposes. I mean, beyond the assigned pattern we're going to put on it, I feel that this actually could be useful for another sort of origami design. I mean, just as pattern making goes, this is pretty fun. At least for me. Because it's fun to find sort of where the puzzle in your mind of what line do you need in order to do, and then finding the perpendicular for it. So I'm noticing a bunch of intersections here. Again, keep an eye out for those. Although I must admit that what I like about this exercise is that it keeps me not double guessing, but it does remind me that, you know, there's a need to sort of step back a little bit and like, wait a minute. Reconsider the prepositions. Yes, Ashi?
Nothing else. Just saying something to me.
Oh, nice. Well, I found that apparently, like, these are going to be useful. So all these corner eightfolds are going to be part of the pattern. All these corner eightfolds are part of the pattern. Something I like about this exercise too is that there's no convoluted method of construction, no sort of hanging something in the air and then sort of hoping that you land. No, this is pretty definite. Just find intersection, go at it. I like when things are straightforward. Oh, did a line that wasn't there.
And we can round them. I've disturbed the pattern.
You what?
Nothing.
I understood I didn't understand the verb. I just heard the pattern. Wonder what that was. What's also fun is that you can actually appreciate how inside of the squares, as we construct these lines, it does make a little sort of root 2 relationship. This little square, if this is unit length, this square is actually root 2, or rather an area of 2. So that's also pretty neat. So yeah, just intersection, perpendicular, intersection, perpendicular, repeat. Now I believe the pattern we're going to do, I mean, with this scale, it's actually going to be pretty big. So there's going to be a lot of shapes, which is nice because it'll look more. It's interesting because I forget now what branch of thought it was, but I remember reading about how the idea of multitude is it can symbolize weakness. So like having a lot of something could actually, you know, mean or represent something that's weak, in the sense that, you know, through all of these different components of a thing, the strength of it sort of gets lost. You know, you can just take it apart easily. But I'm not sure if that's true, like as a general rule, because with these patterns, at least something I find quite appealing and interesting is how their power comes from the crowd. The power comes from being in relation to many similars or many things which fit together. And that's what gives it its power. So we do establish motifs though. I mean, we do, when we fold, we do know of certain sort of, I don't want to say relationships, but yeah, relationships, which we take advantage of. And we can sort of appreciate them as in a sort of microcosm. But where they shine, or where I think their power comes from, is from the macro, the big, sort of having them be in relation to one another. Sort of like an analogy for society, almost. I read in this architecture book that he or she who does not believe in life should not make a city. Like that's almost like a prerequisite. If you're going to build a city, you have to believe in life. And so when we do these patterns, I mean, we are sort of constructing these harmonious arrangements. And by that, I mean that, you know, this could be actually like the blueprint of a garden. This could be the blueprint of a tiling mosaic. You know, this could be many things. And that's also the beauty of it, that we get to sort of choose. And in that choice, you know, we could become overwhelmed because we don't want to make the wrong choice. We don't want to do the thing that's not the best. But it is through sort of trial and error that we overcome that doubt. So whether this is useful for a garden or for a mosaic or for just the appreciation of the pattern itself, all these things can provide fruit or be fruitful. And just sort of the acquired knowledge that is subconsciously passed down to us is also, I think, noteworthy. I skipped my intersection again. I sort of focused on another. I was wrong there for a second. So yeah, what's fun is that once you get to see it on your own, you don't need to look at mine, right? You get to sort of do yours. At least that's what I like to believe. That it's just a matter of sort of understanding the basis, and from there, you kind of just take it from there. But maybe that is a sort of wishful thinking. But I don't know, it's very beautiful how these lines sort of match, and some don't, and some do, and some don't. And it should be taken into account that the one at the Alhambra and so this pattern we're doing is not inside of a square. It is not. It is inside of this rectangle shape. And now that I'm looking at it, now that we're doing it, I suspect that it might be actually the root 2 rectangle, which should suggest to me that if you simply had an A4 paper, you would not need to cut anything. You could simply do this, building it up from the root 2 A4 size paper, and it'll just give you the result. I suspect now that should be at least closer to the actual grid rectangle. So I think this is the last 2 lines for me. At least this is as far as the pattern goes on mine. But again, the attractiveness of these sort of exercises is the idea of overlapping them, not necessarily to other mediums, but definitely on other scales. It could be bigger, it could be smaller, it could be used for something else also. That's also where a lot of this shines, and the possibility of this becoming something that's unexpected. Whether that be an animal, right? Because you could use this as a sort of grid for a tessellation, for an origami tessellation, or for something else. So very well you'd be used for that, or a twist, or something that's more traditional or more in line with familiar branches of thought. But for now, we are going to be sticking to our guns and doing what we do best in these classes, which is folding Islamic patterns. So we're just going to focus for now on the pattern itself. So this is what I meant by not lining up to the edges of the square. It's a little bit off. And what's interesting though is that even though it's a little bit off, the corner of the square, the sort of the radial line that's coming from it, does line up to the pattern line, or at least to the grid line. So that's interesting. Okay, so this is the first step. It took an hour, but we're doing good. We're doing good. We're taking our time. We're taking it slow. Again, we appreciate how inside of the squares, there's this sort of construction of the root 2 area of 2 square inside, which is, I think, is very beautiful. This again could be used as a basis for many patterns, not just the one we're doing right now. And yeah, just to give you a little time to catch up or whatever, I'm just going to finish putting in the vertices of the pattern. And this is an exercise in and of itself, because I sort of have to be able to see a little bit of where my square is at, where my rhomb is at. So this is almost like back to basics almost in a way, because I stopped being guided by the line. So this is also why we take out a pencil and we draw, because look at this. I mean, could you be able to actually react to this thing? Going like, oh yeah, of course, that's my vertex line. I mean, sure you could, but I don't know, it's rather difficult. At least to me.
show you mine. I don't know
Let's see.
how much I've been able to.
Okay, so now this is the heavy lifting. Now the fun part comes in. Where are our star lines? Okay, so I'm gonna take out my example. The other one, this is the bigger scale. Also notice how this is way smaller than what we got. I mean, try to picture how inside of these is it's a single square, which we now have inside of these. So appreciate how much, like I have to use both hands here just to get the point separated. I could actually do these with one hand. So this is how much my pattern is sort of, okay, so that's one thing. Now, at the midpoint of the edge is where the happens. It's where the line sort of becomes our star. So at the midpoint of the edge of so this is the line of the square. Rather, maybe this one is better. And so right here, because these two are equal, right? This star and this star are equal. They meet at the middle. So at the midpoint of the edge of the square is where we have this line that splits. Now this split is the smaller division of the eightfold. It's pretty much this same angle. So this same angle, we're just going to sort of make it happen at the midpoint of the edge. So I'm going to do, let's see here, where's my corner? So these are the corners that I'm going to use as a base right here. I'm going to take this away. Now let's see. Now I want the midpoint of the edge. So, it's a matter of how we approach this problem. Now, apparently, I have this line that goes through there. I know that this might be the center. It's not though. So again, I must find the center of the edge of this square. So what I could do, I think this is pretty simple, is I can take one edge. I could take another, also the advantages of having like the full line be folded. Now this one, actually it might be best not to fold the whole thing. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these two edges and I'm gonna put them together. And I'm just gonna fold on this sort of side of where the square is, just through there. Because again, what I want is that point. I want the point at the middle. Now, because we already have the angle which we need, it's going to be parallel to something else. I mean, what I mean by that is that we can use the same sort of principles of perpendiculars in order to draw this pattern. So just to be safe, I'm going to do the same thing on the other two. Now these to here. And just, again, I don't care about the full line right now. I just care about the midpoint of the edge. Now, if we look at our pattern, which I have here, the lines are parallel and perpendicular to the edges of our grid, which means that through that point, there's actually going to be a line that goes like this. Actually, no, it's going to go like this, toward the center. So on that point, it's going to be, so I'm actually going to mark that point on both sides. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, there it is. Actually, I should use another color for this. Again, this is just to orient me, just to orient myself. So again, on that midpoint, there has to be a perpendicular line. So on that point, I raise, and this line will go oriented at the edges.
What did you do?
So on the midpoint, I did a line that goes perpendicular to one edge and parallel to the other. So it's cutting and going this way. And so now at that point, that one's going to go up. That one's going to go
Actually, I'm not done with the midpoints.
excuse me?
I'm not done with the midpoints.
Okay, so I'm just doing it on one square though, just in one square. I'm not going all over. Because once I get one, I mean, that should be enough information in order to find the rest of the thing. So just as long as you can get one midpoint, one square in the midpoints of it, that should be good enough. Now, the question now becomes, how do I know which way to shoot my perpendicular? As in, why is this one not just cutting the other way? And the answer is that we need, at that point, the line which goes closest to the center of it. So this line is the one that's going closest to this one. If we did the other perpendicular on it, it's not really going close to anything. I mean, it goes close to that one and it might go through that point, but it doesn't give us what we want or what we need. But it does, but this one does. And so I've pretty much written a little square there. It's actually going to be a pattern line, so. Wait a minute. Before I go drawing, I need to I need to establish first that that one's going to hit there. I'm stopping from the midpoint, and I'm stopping at the radial line. Now the idea, of course, just to show you the idea. I'm not good with this compass thing. So what I tried to show with the compass was just how each of these stars is going to be sort of located within that circle. Now that's the general idea. Now we could use now mirror lines actually in order to get the rest of it, but in essence, as it comes down from that point and hits on that radial line, we want it to then have the same sort of refraction angle and then go to the other point. That. So you can even appreciate how this one will also be perpendicular, but now it's going to be perpendicular to this line. It's going to hit that midpoint. I have my red dot marked there. That red dot is my midpoint of the square. And again, this line is the one that falls on itself, this one. So as you can see, what I'm doing is sort of marking this octagon inside of the square. Now, once again, I find that it's the midpoint, and it's going to go toward this intersection of the radial line. So I can sort of put my pencil there, and I can find my perpendicular. It's going through this line. So this line is my guide once more. I have here my red point over here, which is going to be, again, the line I want to go through, the point I want to go through. This one's going to fall on itself. And I want it to go through that red point there that I have here. I can barely see it on the camera, but with my eyes I can pretty clearly see it. Ah, that was, yeah, no, I missed it. It was not through that one, it was through, yeah, I missed it. Did the wrong point. It's supposed to be this one, and I did the one at the bottom. My bad. You can begin to see that. So you begin to see that octagon, and now we want to just sort of finish it off in the way that it's gonna, how do you say this? Yeah, it's gonna finish off the star pattern that we have. So I can just extend this line, which I already have here. And this one is also gonna connect to that one. And now I actually have an intersection which I can take advantage of. And that's here. I don't have the line that goes out towards my center, but I do have the point at which that's going to intersect and go out. That intersection point is right there. I can also mark that intersection with a red dot. Well, again, this is really sort of not, and it's not speculative, but it does require sort of a little bit of an imagination, a little more of a Yeah, an active imagination almost. So let's see now. Well, we know this one's going to go down in the same way, so we have a new intersection, which is going to be sort of on the radial line here. We have that one. So now that one's going to come in at the parallel to that, so we have that point. So you can begin to see at least a little bit of how this is going to come about. So now we sort of need to repeat this process all over the paper. And because of the funky way that this sort of comes about as well, we are going to need sort of to realize that some lines will not completely match up, but because of the range of which we're constructing, some will. For instance, over here, this line is also part of the same sort of range, and it also goes through there. So it actually, these lines, well, the lines of the pattern lines will almost always actually relate to something else along the way. So these are actually good to have completely. So for instance, this same line is going to come through there, and the same line is the one that comes through here, right? So we see how as we do one, we get another. So this line right there, so we do have this. Now on this point on the vertex is where it's perpendicular. And then on the other side, well, it does take a little bit of getting used to and imagining, but I can clearly see on this side sort of my radial divisions as they start to come in and start to play in together. So that it cuts through it and I get to appreciate then the star shape. So same thing for this one. I'm actually focusing in on this small triangle there, and sort of trying to see how it's this line that comes in and that one, and I want it to cut through it perpendicularly at that line, and then it forms it. So for instance, here I can sort of turn around and then I can begin to look for my petal shapes. So I have that intersection here, so that's a petal, and therefore on that point, it comes down. So I'm keeping in mind all these intersections as my guide. I know I'm pretty much repeating myself at this point. But again, I'm trying to take my time and be precise as much as I can with this in order to get the better results. And also, as you can see, well, there's always a cross at the bottom of the rhombs. So if you got this cross, you might as well put it in as a pattern line, this cross. The advantage to this cross is that then you can sort of see where the intersection that's next is at. So at that point, I need to draw this perpendicular on it. Now it's neat how the pattern is just the horizontal and vertical and the diagonals. So the pattern is oriented on the horizontal and vertical line and using the diagonals of the square. So it's pretty tidy in that sense. So for instance, now I have this radial line here, and I have that point, so I know that there is where this is going to go out of. I turn around, I turn over all the time in order just to be sure. Just make sure that it's going through my points. And again, the pattern line being oriented on the radial and on the horizontal and vertical, it's pretty simple to just be sure that we are actually doing these lines in a perpendicular manner to themselves. Okay, so I solved for a square. So I have this square already solved for. And now I need to solve for a rhomb, just to put us out as an example. So now the rhomb is interesting in that it does have a star on both corners, but it doesn't have petals. So we do need to complete this star shape. So we do need this. Now this one's not going to go fully outward, so I actually do need the complement to this one. So the one's going to come down just like this one, but the one on the other side. So I need to mind an intersection and see what one I can find. So I guess I also could complete it towards the other way, in that it's there. This one bounces off to here. So on the intersection on the edge of the square is where this one, of course, is going to shoot up. Higher. So then that one goes up. Now I just need to find the one that comes down. So an octagon started forming, which is going to be also the guide of, so right there I can see, I don't know if you can see that on the camera. So then now the goal is sort of to form these little octagons. And I can see that even though I've been doing everything quote unquote right, I am a little deviated on this one, which is a shame because it is a pattern line. So this one should actually be more precise than it is, or that I'm doing it anyway. How about you, Sashi? How are you doing?
I don't know. You can see my, I don't know.
See, let's see.
Too many lines.
Oh yeah. Are you marking them though? It is pretty ambitious what we're going for right here.
See, every time you're doing a very different pattern, so
yeah, also I try to change the approach a lot, so that also.
yes, it's totally different. Every time it's totally different.
Yeah.
So you cannot say, okay, you have learned this much, so maybe next time you'll be prepared for this much. No.
Hopefully. I mean, I think that somehow, even though, you know, we don't always get what we want, we do at least maybe gain a lesson. That's my hope. that we gain some understanding. Do you think you could repeat this in a bigger scale almost if you wanted to?
Bigger than this? No.
No, I mean bigger in that, like this one I did here.
Yeah, we should have done this.
Want to try
Big
it
Sarah.
in this other
Big,
big scale?
yeah, maybe.
All right, so let's do it in this big scale so we can get something. All right, so why don't we take out another piece of paper then?
No, it's okay.
And you're okay?
Yeah. Yes. The recording is on.
Excuse me, Sashi?
Nothing.
Sorry, I get kind of lost in this, like trying to focus. Almost like tunnel vision.
It's okay.
It's almost like we need to do it on both sides in order to actually not get lost, because when we raise the paper up, it's easy to sort of either get out a little bit of where we want to go, or like it becoming a little bit inaccurate. And it's very natural for it to sort of step out of a frame, almost like step out of the convention. Like for me, I have so many right now inconsistencies and inaccuracies. It's amazing.
But this grid is good. Nice.
So, I mean, also what we could have done, or what we could try, is almost cutting out the rhombs and the squares and almost like folding each one individually, and then sort of putting it together like a puzzle. That should work just as well. I mean, that should produce exactly the same results. But I guess the matter of having it be on the same square is the only thing that changes, which I'm not that I'm not keen on it, but I wouldn't mind if the piece is like separated, because we would get the pattern in the end, and we also would appreciate how it tessellates and like the shapes of the pattern and whatnot, and what makes it be itself, and how it works also, and how we could play around with it a little bit more too. Because this is just one arrangement. I mean, that's also what could also be appreciated. If we looked at it through that lens, we could also imagine that this is just one of many possible configurations, right? So for me right now, as I lift the paper up, I'm also like trying to construct these little octagons so I can see those. I mean, also apparently it has been helping me to have points on my centers, because around each of these centers is going to be an octagon built. And when I fold the line, I can almost try and like focus in on that octagonal shape. And once I do those, it's a matter of then sort of like finding the crisscross, and then I can do that. And so for instance, I know that these lines go from the midpoint to the edge. So from the radial line to the end, you know. So it's this line where these are dropping off. So if you have that crossover, then you can just sort of put that in and go out. Maybe it is worth going for a colored pencil, like changing the color a little bit. Also, we appreciate how in the skinny rhomb, the 1, 3, because this is this is the 1, 3, 2, and 2. We call them those numbers because we need to add to 8, because it's splitting into 8 different parts of the full circle. So this is 3. You can almost appreciate it in how many points it has on that. So we have 1, 2, 3. On the square we have 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and that adds up to 8. And then what I was going to say is that we can see how this line is pretty much going straight until it hits sort of the petal shape not the petal, the pointy part of the star. So it goes straight, hits the pointy, jumps, and then goes back out. Goes straight, hits the point, and goes back out. And so does this line, the one that comes in. It comes in right at the edge of that rhomb, and then goes in and goes out. A variation, which might be worth noting, just is to, instead of going, well, no, it would be weird because then we have to add lines that are not part of the pattern. This is pretty, this is pretty nifty. This is pretty good looking. So yeah, this line's coming in. I mean, at least I know this much. And this line's coming in, at least I know that. It's coming in there. So for this part, I just need to know where this sort of bounces back out in order for the peak of this and then go in. And I actually do have this line, which is going to be part of that pattern. I don't have the rest on this side, but so I think it is useful to have the crease line be complete because it eventually will hit something which we can use it on. So yeah, also might be worth just noting on these points, having different colored pencils, having your centers be marked. So for instance, here, I know it's a little bit inaccurate, and the light is not hitting me properly right now. Let's see if I can get more light in here. So on that point, it's a little inaccurate, I insist, but I can appreciate how there's this octagon forming. It's not exact, but I'm just missing the line from this top. Yeah, sort of some inaccuracies there, but it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's so small right now. I mean, this pattern is just so intricate that I feel that what's important is just that we get enough lines just to more sort of mark it almost, just to sort of see it. So again, we could also just focus in on those points, on the points which I marked, which are centers. So I just need to have an octagon around those points, pretty much. If I can focus in and try to find the rest of the octagon, then I'm golden, I'm set. And because of the way that we folded the grid, we do have enough information to appreciate any of the intersections on that octagon. So for instance, on this one on the bottom here, I see that there's a line that goes through that point, and then I can see that point, mark it, and then just make sure that this line is falling perpendicularly. And one more here. I can mark those 2 points for that octagon. You can see a little octagon there. And once those 2 points are marked, again, I just make sure that it's perpendicular. So I think the advantage we have, the tactical advantage we have, is that the pattern lines are either going to be falling on the edges, or it's going to fall on the radial line. So all the pattern lines are going to be like this. Either they fall on the edges or they fall on the radial line. So that's good news for us. because then all we need really to do is just to find the centers and do our little octagons and sort of go around just marking the rest of the little octagons, and that will solve for the rest of the thing. Because that extension of the octagon is what this is all about. Now, I might be getting a little bit abstract here. I might be getting a little bit over my head. Supposing that this is just a simple matter of just finding intersection and just joining it, I might be a little bit over my head here. But at the same time, I feel that there's this sort of intuition that can be achieved. Again, not at first and not instantly, but there is a case to be made that with enough practice and patience, one might unlock further abilities in order to get the lines that we need and sort of see the lines that we need, mostly to see them. I think that's the harder part, just to see them. But again, once that is unlocked, then everything just becomes a little more, not tedious, but it does become more of a sort of like, all right, so what task is next? It's like a job almost. Where's my next line? Where's the next little octagon shaped thing? Where am I going for? And so one line informs another. You can course correct if needed. Keep your eyes open. So I'm more focused in on the finding and completing the octagon method right now. And what I mean by that is I'm just sort of focusing in on the back here where I have no lines drawn in, and just finding my center and just sort of trying to get as much of an exact octagon around it as I can. I'm having a hard time making it actually be perfect. Some lines are sort of not where they need, when I need them to be. But most are, or most seem to be. So that's a good news. This one, for instance, is clearly out of whack. I don't know why, but this seems to be for me the best method. The completing the octagon. Just ba, and then I can sort of leave that. And then I know this one next is coming there, but it seems to be one of the inaccurate ones. So I put it down and I see if I can sort of course correct or see if it's actually falling on the edge. And then I can sort of also appreciate how it's coming in on other octagons. And because the octagon is just two squares intertwined, then we can also appreciate it in that manner where we try to construct these two squares intertwined. I'm trying to find sort of the intersection that would make those two squares happen. And so it will happen that, one line informs the other. So when you do a line, you should see it sort of inform the rest of them as it goes through other centers. So I have just these points marked as my centers. I can just sort of follow them and I try to find the center where it's at. Imagine the octagon and see, okay, which line is missing? And I sort of calculate where it's going to land. And then I sort of find an intersection that I can use. And I try to fold on that intersection. I try to also mind my lines. Most of all, try to make things fit. And by fit, I mean intersect. Just to respect the pattern itself. So if you have a line and it's going through there, then you should try and make it fit as much as you can. If you need to do 2 lines, not ideal, but whatever works at this point. How are we doing, Sashi?
I'm doing very bad.
No, very bad.
Yes. I'm lost.
You're lost?
Yes.
Do you have several colors that you can use?
I'm not ready with colors, but
Sometimes I find that having different colors helps us sort of differentiate between different things. So if you're lost, I would definitely recommend getting some colors out right about now. So again, important point to note is that when we draw the line from the midpoint of the edge of the square and it goes down to mark the octagon, it stops at the radial, at the diagonal. Now we don't have all of them, but we should see at least some of the radial lines of our octagons. And those should be enough information, or should have enough information for us to make some sort of judgment as to which lines are missing or which ones can be or shouldn't be or are correct. So for instance, here I have, well, I stopped there because it's at the radial line, at the diagonal of this square. So that's where I stop. And then because the pattern lines are all going to be sort of oriented either on the edges and whatnot and all this stuff that I was talking about. I find sort of on one line the intersection, I bring it down. As you can see, my paper is very messy, but it's fine. I mean, I don't mind it being messy as long as I can get the pattern I'm looking for. That's why I also use the colors, because they help me sort of forget that it's messy, and it just becomes this sort of complete the thing rather than, you know, make it look really nice, really tidy and whatnot. That is sort of like the next step of this. Just try and like get it to be as tidy as can be, or as good looking as it can be. But first step for me is construct it, make it. What do I need of it? What lesson can I gain from this? And so with the colors, that's the advantage of it, that I can just sort of, when I'm satisfied with my reference, I can just do the color and I mark it, and I find my intersections and I mark them. And you know, they might not be perfect, but it's pretty, it's good. You know, it looks all right. And that's the thing about the multiplicity thing I was talking about, how if you have a lot of things, then, you know, if one of them isn't so good, the other sort of compensate for it. So just the fact that it's in a composition sometimes is the saving grace of these things. Now, for instance, this one is clearly wrong, or something is clearly out of whack here. This one seems to be very out of place. I'm starting to draw it in too. Again, disregard or all sort of preconception of the order, and just really just go for results. Just go for results. So again, we use the edges of our tiles, of our squares and our rhombus in order to guide us. Because I can find sort of where that line is coming in. I always stop at the edges. I'm always stopping at the edges of the tile in order to see what's next. So I can see there that I have to stop, and there I sort of jump forth. Just make sure that it's sort of matching to that. I can always unfold, see that it's going through where I need it to be, give it or take it. And just so where it matches, so that one's still not matching. So I need to take it a little bit away. I should be able to see it like on this side too. So on there. Now at one point I must have made a critical mistake. Not a critical, but I must have made a mistake along the way, because things are sort of a little bit out of focus. But they're enough in focus that I can sort of keep my pattern going regardless. Again, I'm keeping an eye out for these little octagons in the back. Are you still folding, Sashi?
Zero.
Hmm?
Can you see?
Let's see. You
It
see,
is
that actually, that falls in the idea of like using these as a method of exploration. I think that's wonderful. I really like that, Sashi. That's really good.
Thanks. Which week movie?
So again, keeping the octagons in mind. So again, something is a little bit off, and that's sort of creating all these little rifts on mine. But I'm just persevering and I'm persisting. So I'm just focusing on this thing. Because it's demanding my attention. I can sense the pattern wants me to do it good, wants me to do it justice. Although I don't know if justice is happening right now, but at least something's happening. But again, the idea is pretty stable in the sense that, you know, you just need to sort of repeat and process all these different things. And now where it might turn to origami, that's the interesting part, at least, you know, theoretically, that's interesting. Because the proposal would then be to sort of find what to do with all these folds and all these lines. And what I would suggest is to use these channels as twists and maybe see what comes up, because there should be some parts of the pattern that cannot be so easily interpreted as twists, but they would sort of be, you could solve for that. So I think that that would be interesting to solve for. Yeah, Bridget suggested in last session she was in, that I should consider actually ranking these in terms of the difficulty.
Yes.
Almost like, hey, you know, we're going to do this difficult one tomorrow, like whoever wants to join, or we're going to do the simple one tomorrow, whoever wants to join. And maybe that will help people be more, you know, in tune as to what's happening. If I just keep surprising people with how difficult it is, it might throw people off a little bit.
Yeah,
so maybe I should actually qualify these.
It is important because one should know how much time it's going to take and what is the difficulty level.
Yeah, otherwise it's just not as
just
fun.
Folding and folding.
It's never my intention to waste people's time. On the contrary, you know, I want everybody to have a good time and also to learn something in the way.
Yeah, of course we're learning. Of course.
That's good. That's good. But yeah, some of these patterns can get a little tricky pretty fast. And that's what's so cool about them, because you can see them and sort of appreciate them. And even though you have sort of the clues or the solution, that doesn't necessarily sort of give you everything you need. You need also sort of some sort of ability, at least to sort of execute it in the way that, you know, that it needs to. But I think it's a matter of time, maybe. But I am learning a lot teaching these things and sort of how to go about sharing them almost. To some degree, I believe that I'm sort of practicing or not practicing, rather just going through the motions. And one day these will become like part of a book. I think that would be the ultimate goal almost. Just to have a book of all these patterns that we've been doing in the folding sessions. It's called the Folding Sessions Patterns book, and like all these Islamic patterns and like the principles of how to fold them and all the different techniques that you might need or use. And then sort of like giving you free reign on which technique you use and like solving it for you almost, like, all right, so this is the possible solution. You know, you're free to experiment and try out to see what works best for you and keep these points in mind for this pattern and whatnot. Yeah, and the people go on their own, sort of trying to find new solutions. So I think that's also what's so cool about these, that there are many approaches, and that suggests that somebody very well could find some solution which isn't obvious, or some solution which hasn't been seen before to a certain degree. Although the advantage to this, whatever style we do, is that as we progress on the pattern, the less work we have to do for the rest of it. So it's almost as if it's just the heavy lifting is at the beginning. Then the pattern just sort of informs itself, and there's less lines to be done as some lines solve for other lines and whatnot. So the more you do it, the less you have to do. That's kind of like a no-brainer, though. Okay, so I believe that this idea is sort of achieved to some extent. Like, we get to appreciate how this might work. At least, in theory, we get to see how it's the midpoint, and on that we cross perpendicular and with the diagonal line. So at least this one was pretty correct, because we did find the midpoint. So, if one were more inclined to actually be more precise with these, I would suggest actually finding the midpoints and then doing this crossing thing. This just like making sure that at that midpoint you go, all the ways. That would be, parallel or perpendicular to the edges, and then going at that same point with a line that complements it on the diagonal. I keep mixing up radial and diagonal. So I think we should, at this point, move on to the next exercise. So what do you think?
Yes.
Right on. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to finish it later. We got to appreciate a beautiful Islamic pattern from the Alhambra. I hope that also, with that insight, one can find the same pattern but in a different scale, that whether it be sort of more expansive or more contracted. So what I want to do for this next exercise, is sort of go to the volumetric aspects of the hexagon. Sort of do there are several patterns which I very much appreciate regarding the hexagon. And so we're going to construct a hexagon first, as we're going to start this exercise with. So for my hexagon, I fold my paper in half, like so, on the long edge. And then I have to fold this one as well. And I fold just around here, not the whole thing, just around there. Just a line around there. And then I take from the bottom here, from that point, and then I take the edge and I put it on that line I folded. I crease there a little bit. So make sure that it's straight, just going on that point, corner falling on that fold. And so this next trick that I'm going to do, actually Adam Williamson taught it to me. I taught him this and he taught me this one. We just take the remainder edge and we match it up to this one. And because those two lines are the same, they should be touching. And if they don't, we can always like make them sort of match. But these two should match. Why? Because they're coming out from the midpoint. Therefore, they should be the same. And once they are touching, they both should be touching on that point on the fold. And what's cool about this is that this establishes another vertex of the hexagon over here. So no need for mirroring. And then we take this remainder and we put the remainder of this on the fold. And then we have sort of a left off here, a little bit, that's the line from the center. And so if you're having an A4 paper, this should be longer, but that fold, we do fold it on that same fold, and then we just bring that down on that line. Finally, we simply unfold this.
Please repeat the last one.
Yeah, so the last step is when we fold this one here, we see that this line is the remainder of this, but we can use exactly that line as a fold.
Because you have letter size, that's why I got confused. Because
oh yeah, it should look different for you, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
But you should also have a remainder though. And that remainder is the reference. And if you're doing it like very precise, then these two should match. No matter what, it should be over here, should be over there, but these two should match somewhere. And if you want to then just be more accurate, then you can sort of redo the fold without this. And you should see that this one falls on itself and this line also falls on there. Once we have those 1, 2, and 3, and 4, this one, which is one the match up to there, we simply just take the remainder here and we just simply bisect. We put that on the angle we had. So what's cool about this method of getting a hexagon is that there are no mirrors, no bounces. Well, there are certainly bounces in that it hits and then sort of refracts over there. By the way, apparently that what I call a bounce is actually called a refraction in light terms. In terms of light bouncing off of mirrors, we call that refraction. So yeah, so there are refractions and reflections. But it's a little bit more organic to some extent. And now we cut away everything that is not the hexagon. So we cut away this, and this over here on the top. So for me, when I cut, I simply take my fold and I fold the other way. And I just crease with my nail or the thumb, just really strongly. And then the other way as well. And what that should do, folding both ways and very strongly, is sort of weaken, or rather be weakened by strength, because it is so strongly marked that if I rip it on that line, the energy will have no place to go but that which we have outlined. So strength becomes weakness here. Or rather, it just becomes where the rip, it has no, the rip would rather take the path of least resistance. So because we have creased that path so well, so much. This is very easy for it to sort of come out. Now, just as in squares, in hexagons, it happens that whatever grid we decide to put on it, the factor, the number we choose, will make a difference to its structure and the possibilities which that structure might bring forth. So what that means is that if we have a square grid, let's say, for an example, and we have that square grid be an even number, not only an even number, just a multiple of 2, no multiples of 3, just multiples of 2 and 4 and whatnot. So that would be either a 4, an 8, 16, 32, just folding half and half and half and half over and over. Now, that structure might be, pretty classical, and within it we could find other divisions, right? Inside of 24, there are 10s, right? But if we, instead of folding a base of 16 or 32 in our square grid, we fold instead of 12. And I don't know why I said 24. 24 is not, you need a 3 to make 24. But yeah, point being that if we include a third into our divisions, the possibilities change. It's interesting, but they do change. In some weird way, the paper just has different relationships when we do different grids. So not only the shape of the paper matters, but also the grid that you put onto the paper matters. So that's why I've seen even tutorials on like getting a fifth, and they include folding first to 6 and then cutting away 1 bit in order to have 5s. So that does happen. So there is a theorem for getting, certain divisions on the square, and I would just theorize just based on intuition. There has to be a way on the hexagon to get also all sorts of different relationships. I would bet, but that's just intuition. There's a pretty neat way of getting thirds. But for the pattern we want to work on right now, just to keep it interesting, we're going to take it to fourths. So all that I said, is pretty much just going to throw out the window, because we are going to keep it pretty basic in just half and halves and halves. But I just put that out there because you can begin to sort of wonder and sort of speculate, not speculate, but you definitely begin to wonder what other divisions of grids could we apply to this thing and get, and what will we get, So far what we really need is just these lines. These radial lines is what we need. Now we could also get these ones. I'm putting everything in the same state. No mountain valley configuration. It's just getting all my radial lines of 6 onto my hexagon. So it's just corner to corner, edge to edge, all on the same side. It really doesn't matter because we're going to use these only as references, not as any sort of active fold. And now, all we need to do is sort of establish what we're going to divide. We could either divide the apothem or the radius into whatever number we choose. For our purposes right now, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to divide the radius into fourths. So we already have a line of that. That's a half. So let's get our halves in. It's funny that we start always with the most difficult pattern and then we end up with the easiest one.
Easiest? Okay.
Yeah, this is way easier than the one we just did. Way easier. And also you get a little origami thing at the end. Whereas in that one, I feel that it's just like, let's set up the bases. Actually, we went a little bit head first onto that one. We didn't dip our toes into the idea. We just sort of. So I might need to sort of revisit this pattern, the one we just did. So I fold my radius in half, and now if I want to do a half of a half, well, it's just a matter of taking my line, which I have. I'm going fast, aren't I?
This side. We are working on the same side, right?
Yeah, everything is on the same. Well, actually, yeah, I did turn it over. So my radial lines are like on a valley, and my pattern line, which I'm folding right now, are on a valley or a mountain too, relative to it.
On this side, all are valley. Okay.
Yeah. So one line is for the radius, and the other side is for the pattern lines. So now we're going for the fourth. And as you can see, there's nice relationships for the fourth. Ba, 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 all these. Real nice. So as much as I like to incorporate the thirds or the fifths into my thing, honestly, halves aren't that bad. But they're so easily done that when you compare other designs to it, it's easy to sort of see how those grids can inform the designer. And therefore, if one would want to venture out and try something new or explore something that most people haven't seen, I think it's wise to sort of begin by using a grid which is uncommon. That's a nice way of sort of getting into uncharted territory. Even if it seems trivial, because you might think, well, I have a 16 grid, so what difference does it make if I start with an 11 grid? Like if I cut away my 5 little bits, or if I have a 15 grid, like what difference is it going to make? And the answer is, well, plenty. And you should definitely try it out to see for yourself how that works for you. And, you know, given that there are no rules, I mean, except I think that really the results are what matters. And yeah, I mean, especially when you look at origami design, you begin to appreciate how much exploration is at hand there, like how much people deviate from the charted path in order to find some interesting insight. Now we have options. I'm going to show you the motif, and then we're going to sort of see how we can change it up a little bit. Sound good? All right. So we're going to change one of these lines. The smaller line, we need to be the opposite way. So I have all these in mountains. All my divisions, my 4 grid on the radius are all mountains. The one that's closer to my center, I'm going to change into a valley now. Just that one. And I only need the line really that's at the center like that. Everything else, you know, you can fold it the other way or not. It doesn't really matter. So we're about to venture into the theory of solids. So there are solids we call the Platonic solids, and there are solids called the Archimedean solids, and they have their own different sort of quirks to them. But if one looks closely at them, we'll find that certain things are repeating, and that is the number of shapes it has. So no matter if you go for the Archimedean solids or the Platonic solids, if a pentagon is in the pattern, there will be always 12 pentagons. Always, always, always. So what that
12.
suggests, yeah?
12 pentagons.
12 pentagons. That's just like a rule of space, of spherical space. So if you have a pattern, if you're sort of constructing a pattern which is sort of a solid and a sphere, you can like have anything. You can have like triangles, mostly triangles and hexagons, because those can like relate to each other and be flat. And then you just add 12 pentagons, it will always close into a sphere. Even if it's like elongated, it will look like an egg. But if there's 12 pentagons, it will exactly close. So what we're going to do here as an experiment, just to sort of test the theory a little bit, is to sort of appreciate first this shape, this center hexagram. After the hexagram, there's going to be a point here that's going to sort of mark these sort of
Do I need
hexagons.
to mark it? So your
Not
paper,
really. You don't
there's
need
too
to.
much light on your paper.
Oh, sorry. You don't need to. You don't need to mark them, but let me close this one now. You don't need to, but you know, I'm doing it here just to illustrate. And so what I want to do now is I want to take advantage of these being a valley, and you can see that it's sort of coming out. And now I'm going to turn this hexagon into a pentagon. So I'm going to do a double mountain trick on that center. I'm going to take, I actually have a choice. Which triangle am I going to, you know, eliminate or subtract rather? I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to take this mountain edge, this mountain, and I'm going to put it over here. Now, if I open it, how does that look? It looks as we're having a line go from that center towards out. So, you know, we could just take advantage of that line and see like, well, okay, so I'm going to just extend that line. And of course, there's going to be some nice relationship given that this is, of course, a hexagon. So, you know, we could take advantage of those and just, you know, go ahead and just put them all in. So I'm taking you through the process of like how one might...
Are we making a new line? New crease?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much, it's the line to eliminate the hexagon here, as because what we did first was, so the trick of the mountain was simply just to get the line that we needed. And so once we have this pentagon, which is sort of like the objective almost, then we can extend that line. Actually, we should just fold also this one. And that, I'm folding that one because I also want to show what would happen if instead of folding like on the outside here, we would fold on the inside over here. So this has a better grip. This has a better grip on it, and like it's falling very neatly into the next one. And it has a little bit of a nexus to it. It has a little bit of a flare to it almost too.
We are going too fast.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, I haven't finished putting in the folds yet. So yeah. So as you can see right now, these centers which I've marked, I think that one is better. I think that's structurally superior. So as you can also notice, I'm folding the vertices to the other centers. That's going both ways too. Like if I wanted to do the other line, it will just go to the other centers.
Now what?
Okay. Now we get to choose which triangle we subtract. I'm going to subtract the one that goes toward my edge here. We could as well, you know, we can choose any one of them, but I feel that this one is the most structurally sound because there is a tuck that happens with the next one. And so then we begin to shape it, shape the pentagon. It's marking the...
It again, please,
yeah, sure. So I'm taking away, I'm going to my left.
But there's too much light on your foot.
Yeah, sorry. Let's see if I can close this a little bit more. Yeah, the sun kind of comes in, comes out, and does what it wants. Okay, so the blinds are set in, so now this, maybe it's too dark now, but it's fine.
No, this is fine.
So I'm going from my center here toward my left.
This should go up the center.
Yeah, it's almost as if this corner is falling on the center, the one next to it.
And the center is going up, right? Okay.
And then once you have this, then you begin to click it in order to outline the pentagon. So for instance, I need to click here. And then I need to click here in the bottom. Here, here, and there. You see how that gives me this pentagon?
Yes.
So now once we have one on this center now, the one next to it, we also do the same thing.
Now here.
And again, I'm sort of marking my pentagon, outlining it. And we pretty much just go around now.
For next one, I'm confused.
So keep an eye out for, so even where this folds, that should be the center which is transformed. So first what you want to do is to be able to lift it, to have this sort of be towards you. Once you do that, then it's just a matter of sort of pressing and marking that pentagon shape. Press, 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 press.
It is nice, interesting.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. And because we only have 6 pentagons, it's not going to close. It's going to be remained open. So then here's the question. What if instead of having fourths, we go for eighths? And now we have more triangles and we have more hexagons to find another sort of thing like this one. And now that if we went double, then we could find in that enough space to make it close, because we could establish in a bigger sort of division area, yeah, more hexagons, which could turn into more pentagons, which collapse like so. So this is a nice little bowl, nice little plate. And it's because we have 6 pentagons that this is just sort of, neatly open, has a nice area to it. If you were to sort of insulate this or like make this waterproof, you could just like put some rocks inside, put some dirt in it, make some holes in the back. You could even just use this as it is with the paper that you're using, or any cardboard. I don't know why people don't. I mean, sure, it'll get soggy, but if you put in something you could do to make your paper more resistant, to simply paste paper upon paper. Make several of these, put one on top of the other, paste them all together, gives it a nice structure. Make some holes in it, put some rocks in order for the mud not to accumulate too much. Make some holes in the back. I think I'll reset that. Put some dirt, a little plant like a cactus, something that doesn't need that much water so the paper doesn't get too soggy, right? And there you go. Now you got a nice little paper pot. I don't know how much that would last, but that's an idea. So we could just keep this. That's a, this is perfectly fine.
This idea, this design into ceramic or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And also, well, that's also something to take into consideration, that fact that we're sort of eliminating in a spiraling motion. But what if instead of going for a spiral, we actually went for left and right? So instead of going for 6 unique sort of directions, we went for 3 alternating ones. And by that I mean, so let's say we choose one. So I'm going this one to the left, and now this one, instead of going to my left as well, this one would be also going in this direction. So it's a little change of pace, but like it gives us the same or like some similar result. But we would have 3 of these.
Extra flaps.
Which is something that we could sort of find different ways to sort of accommodate or solve for. Wait a minute. But again, so now the next thing to do with this would be to take it to the next level. Now I know we might be a little bit tired because we did fold that Islamic pattern, which was a little bit of a, it was an ambitious design, but you know, just real quick, if you want to follow along, you know, you're very much welcome to. But right now, I'm just gonna show you.
I'm not opening this. Yeah, I'll just see. Yeah.
You're gonna sit this one out.
Because I don't have this braid ready, and I don't want to open this one.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That is the thing. Let's see. What I'm gonna do right now is pretty much just go to, instead of having 4, I'm gonna go to 8. And so now that it wouldn't have more space for more hexagons, then it would be interesting to see if I can actually make it close. And what's interesting in that sort of configuration or in that sort of design ideal is how we have to consider the elimination of space, or what I call sacrifice. It's a topic that we've rarely touched upon, but it used to be a lot of what I used to do. Because there was a time when I used to design boxes. And the idea for a design of a box or any volumetric object from a flat piece of paper is you need to take into account what you're going to get rid of in order to gain the volume. So it's easy to see that when you sort of like take any carton box that you can find around you, right? It can be like a carton of cigarettes. It can be a carton of like a toy or something, like anything that's just cardboard made. I think cigarettes are interesting because they actually are pretty volumetric and they do hold several cartons. And like, take it apart. And you take it apart and you're going to see how there's a lot of space which is taken away. Like if you're going to lay it flat, there's going to be some empty spaces between your shape. So then a nice exercise would be, what did they take away, or how do I make this into a regular rectangle? How do I, if I filled in this, if I filled in the spaces, what would I get? Or rather, what would I do with them if I couldn't cut away like they do in order to get that volume, right? So that's a nice little think tank thing, you know, just a thing to think about. So yeah, I'm just upping this grid, going a little bit higher, see what's up. Again, I missed. It's here.
You're making 8 or 16 or 16.
Right now I'm in, yeah, well, actually that's a good insight. It's 16 across. That is true. It goes from point to point, that's 16. But actually there's people that count it like that. I like to count it from the center outwards.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I think it's somewhat easier to some extent. I don't know why. But that's a very good insight, Sashi. Way to go. So now sort of same process in where I find my center hexagram, which is going to be now this one. So I like to use hexagrams instead of hexagons because I find that it gives me a nice little, more structure, in that these triangles are sort of part of the way that it sort of comes about. So now these 6 points, again, same deal. I'm going to take away at them. Now, it's harder for me to take away toward this side because look at all this space that I have to sacrifice. So you can see how this could turn into a problem down the road. But let's do it right now and see what we come up with. Well, first off, you can see that there's a lot of overlap. I can feel it. I can sense it. You know, it's right here. It's all this stuff. But I'm gonna keep it going because apparently, like, it is sensible. But there's now like 3 layers on this pentagon. So eventually, when I turn back, it's gonna be a whole lot of layers. So that's also now the economy of this thing, like how, or rather which triangle should we get rid of in order to be more economical, right? In order to have less overlap or more overlap, depending on what we want, right? Because this is actually going to give it a lot of strength, a lot of structure. All these layers on top of each other. This is going to be very structurally sound. Actually, I can feel it be very structurally sound. And it looks very tight in a way. So next one. Again, I'm using my finger there to sort of pop that pentagonal pyramid there in the middle. This line is falling on itself, push. I'm trying to sort of keep in my imagination where the triangle is, the one that I'm going to eliminate, because with all those overlaps and layers, you know, it might be easy to sort of get lost, and I don't want to get lost right now. So I try to keep a level head, see what's going to be taken away. I see that this whole line is going to be taken away, so I have to sort of go for that, go for broke. Put it into position. And again, I just start to sort of sculpt the thing. As it comes down, I begin to sculpt the shape, sculpt those pentagonal pyramids, just going around the center, just making sure that when I do one doesn't undo the other. That tends to happen, or it might happen. And then I turn it over, and again, I just sort of squeeze and put things into position. So again, same design, more space. It looks more like a little leg. So now if I wanted to sort of begin to close it, then the question is, all right, so which one do I take away? And well, the answer would be this one, because then I would have sort of this triangle, and around this triangle, there would be like these three pentagons.
It is shining at some point.
Oh yeah, sorry.
At some point.
So yeah, this is actually getting a little bit difficult here in what we take away, because I don't have enough space for it. But, you know, one could begin to actually use that bottom layer, maybe give it a little sound or structure on the top here. Go uppity.
So you're making a pentagon on top also.
Yeah, that would be my idea right now, to try and make this one be a pentagon as well. But I have all this space that's being folded within, that I can actually sort of also use this and like try to solve for it, or I can actually use it as a little cap. Actually, design one, I lost that design, but there was one design I did once. It was pretty much this idea, but what I actually achieved was that this inside space served as a little cap, little top ceiling on it. So there are many sort of structural considerations which could be fruitful. And in this case, well, we're sort of shooting for containment. Why containment? Well, that's also why we want to take away one of those pentagons. Right? We want it to be closed. So the objective is containment. See, I begin to appreciate how this one is becoming my pentagon, a little out of whack, a little out of shape there. But, you know, that's a possible solution, it seems. So what's nice about this one, at least, you know, prematurely declaring something, is that it does have these little bits on the top here. So I think that this is actually a lot of fun. I like this sort of design procedure a lot, because it's very effective, and because there's a lot of sort of gray area as to what can be considered a solution and what can't be considered a solution. And also, like, you begin to appreciate how complicated an easy thing can become, how fast an easy thing can get complicated. And that's one of the more fun aspects of the folding procedure, sort of having your expectations be met with surprise. and you have to sort of, you know, think on your feet. You have to be able to sort of improvise something which you hadn't solved for before. And as much as it's fun, it's also kind of confusing, and it can get frustrating at times. Because either what you're doing isn't what you expected, or it's creating this sort of rift, or the paper is sort of giving way. So there's a bunch of things that, quote unquote, could go wrong. But the lesson, the idea, the curiosity that sparks, that's what you're going for. You want to be able to remain curious, and no matter how good you get, you try to stay humble and going like, well, you know, I don't know nothing. Like, I don't know everything. There's a bunch of things that might seem like I am aware of or like interacting with, but I don't understand. And I think that's a lot of the fun, like playing with something that's completely over your head. At least origami for me, I find that origami is just so beyond what I can. I could spend my lifetime studying the folds. I could watch those YouTube videos of Eric Demain, and I feel that still I would not be satisfied theoretically with the possibilities of folding. In fact, sometimes I believe that approaching it too theoretical like might lose a little bit of the fun. But I don't know if that's true though. I think that I might be mistaken on that one. What do you think, Sashi? You having fun?
Yes.
That's good, that's good. That's why we're here. So see, now all this space, I'm like tempted to sort of try and find how to lock it into position almost. Sort of like even to send this back, or like send this to this side, or maybe like to the other side almost. See, that looks more fun. I really appreciate you being here, Sashi. Honestly, if you weren't here, I would be.
I just got that. What did you say?
Oh, that I'm very thankful, grateful that you're here.
Oh, please,
It's
I'm learning. I'm learning from you. I should be thankful.
I don't know. It's yeah, it's much better to do actually, you know, do this for someone, with someone, than it is to just be me, sort of monologuing or whatever. Even though I do monologue quite a bit, it's still. Yeah, not the same.
See, I can do these kinds of things. The patterns are just too difficult for me.
Well, I did take that a little bit too far. I did take this one a little bit too far, I must admit.
Although
I
I
think,
like the grid. The grid was very nice.
which one?
Those rhombs and squares, that grid, basic
Yeah, the
grid
grid
was
is
nice.
actually, you could use that grid for many patterns. Because you could like find decorations for the square and the rhomb. I would actually recommend maybe to cut away each of them. Maybe that's a little bit too much. But there are many solutions to this thing. Like one would suppose, right?
Sarah must have done it. But
Hmm.
she didn't. But I, sorry.
So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much today's lesson. It was going for these playful, getting rid. I mean, this is one configuration. I want to see another one next class, but and what I mean by another one is actually playing with other shapes. It could be. I've played with this for the octagon as well, where I take one away and it's a heptagon. It makes little heptagons here. So that's interesting. And also, this could also be a different way of approaching domes, in that you start out flat and then you can sort of see how the symmetry changes. So if we had actually an Islamic pattern, that was decorated within these hexagons, you would see this sixfold turn into a fivefold. And it would be a matter of perspective for that sixfold to turn into a five almost. We can actually maybe see it here. We have this 8, and we could take away sort of one of these. But see, like the risk of that is that it takes away all this. Everything that's underneath just gets taken away. So then the challenge is trying to find a bounce, or like trying to find somewhere where this one can sort of fall off to the other one in order for not everything to get out of us. Let's see, real quick. This 8 becomes a 7. So if we had a dome, like something that we have to look up at, you could have an 8-fold pattern. And so you have the shapes, and somebody that's like more familiar with the shapes going like, wait a minute, I've seen that cross before. That's an 8-fold. What is it doing in a 7-fold pattern? So that's a way also to interpret these sorts of things. I was looking at pictures yesterday. I found several domes. There was this one in the Alhambra actually that has a center of 8, and all the pieces inside the pattern are 10. So there's like a regular pentagram. There's the petal shapes, the shield shapes of the decagon, and all these different things. But the center is an 8, but it's a dome. So the pictures are looking up, and the perspective is sort of, it makes sense. But it's a game. It's a perspective game. See, I might venture into the Mukarnas world. I mean, like take inspiration from the Mukarnas to do more 3D stuff. I think that's going to be the next step for me, because it's just so fun to look at them. And yeah, I love Mukarnas. I love all these stuffs of the Islamic world, of the art of it, like the playing of perspective, the mathematical implications, the time it must have taken, the time and effort it must have taken, and how it's like generationally built, right? Somebody like works on it, then the father gives to the son the designs, and then the son takes the designs and like applies them, and maybe the son is a carpenter or whatnot, right? So it could then be sort of brought into another medium, or so I love that. I love that there's like all these stories behind the patterns. Most of them are like hidden or like taken by the sands of time, so they remain unknown, but the spirit lives on, the patterns live on, and we can still be a part of that story. Even though that we will also be taken by the sands of time, we can at least in some unconscious or indirect subliminal way participate, just like all those people did. And so we all get a little chapter that only God can read, right? The book of God. And so with that, the session is officially over. And I want to thank you all for watching. If you're tuning in on the recording, thank you. Thank you, Sashi, for being here. Really appreciate it. And I implore you to sort of take away from this the lesson. And by that I mean, consider constructing a smaller scale for this tiling. So for instance, in this one, what I started out with was, of course, one corner. So I started out in this corner. And then what I said was, well, all right, so I'm just going to establish this big rhomb. And this big rhomb is going to be like that. It's going to be like this little rhomb. So I can establish that at any point. And so what I did was I used actually a square. So in here, up to this point, that's a square. Of course, I decided to go, fully with the letter size. I didn't cut it. So I recommend actually that you don't cut your A4. If you have an A4, I recommend you don't cut it. And maybe try to construct a pattern on it. So for instance, here I went for, this is a half of my square. Oh, nice, look at that. Nice little bowl, right on. I'll show you another trick. I call this the ripple. So if you have like anything that's doing that, you can always sort of click on the back. Well, it requires sort of a fold there, but you could always sort of make this, you know what I mean?
Is there there's no crease, but if you push it up, it will come.
It's better to have a crease, honestly. It
Yeah.
is better to have a crease. If you don't have a crease, yeah, it is better to do with the crease first. Now, what's interesting is that if you fold it like half within this hexagon, then it will give you half. But if you fold thirds, you will actually have like one that goes like up, and then you could do the second third down. You know what I mean?
Oh.
So that's always a lot of fun too. And that way you can get more space inside. So this one I could actually, again, I think about pots a lot, like having little flowers inside of these or cactuses. But it will require you to sort of insulate this, like with some glue, or making like a little base on it, or getting some paper that's sort of plastified, like a little plastic covering that it might have, or something to make it waterproof. And then you do this, and then there you go. Or alternatively, fold an Islamic pattern or print an Islamic pattern, and then do this on it. And then you can have like an Islamic pattern be sort of 3D instantly. So that's also cool. And then you can
That's
sort of play
really
around with
cool.
it, and you can cut it too, get some more sort of lighting effects on it, different like shapes coming out, whatnot, layers. So yeah, there's a lot of things to take into account, and some things that we can take advantage of. And what I like about all these things is that you can always find intricate details and designs to incorporate as you progress into it. Now, there's so much that one could do. Even with the simple stuff, there's always so much. And so I understand how too much can be overwhelming and you just kind of want to stick to the road that you know. But every now and again, I recommend that you sort of take away from the road, take a little detour, and like go see what you find in the uncharted territory.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
thank you very much,
Thank you
Sashi.
so much. Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Take care now.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Get a little screenshot for you. There we go. All right, guys. So till the next time. Take care now. Bye bye.